the Super Speedway.
Welcome to episode 249 of the Super Speedway podcast, recorded Monday, August 15th, 2022. I'm your host, Eric Young, and my co-host, James Cush, is off this week, but I am not alone, as I am joined this week by special guest host, Derek Winter. Derek, how's it going today?
Eric, I am doing well. Appreciate you having me. I hope James is having a good time. You got a perfect weekend to get away, or a good weekend to get away, and happy to join you here.
Well, I appreciate you being on, and I don't care if James is having a good time because we're going to have a good time here. So,
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Coming off the Richmond weekend for the NASCAR Cup Series, the Worldwide Express 250 for Carrier Appreciation. Oh no, that's the Truck Series race. Never mind. It was the I don't know what the heck the race was. Federated Auto Parts 400. Is that what it was?
I think so. I believe that's correct. Yep.
Wow.
Yes, I believe that's right.
And like I told you before this podcast, we don't edit, so I am going to leave that screw up in. Yes,
Wait,
it was.
Do you have a drink over there? Do you have a beer over there?
No.
Is that what's going on?
No, that would be a good excuse though. Yes,
Right.
According to my NASCAR results, it was the 65th annual Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond Raceway. First time in the fall, in the daytime in a long time. And old Kevin Harvick goes from maybe he's never going to win again to winning 2 races in a row now. He gets his 60th win and ties him on the all-time win list with Kyle Busch.
Man, Kevin Harvick really showing why he is the closer.
Yeah.
Right. It is good to see Harvick getting back to victory lane. Not just last week, but now 2 weeks in a row. But I do have to say, I had a little money on Christopher Bell yesterday, and Harvick cost me $255. So I needed one more lap there.
Yeah. Christopher Bell definitely was coming. I did tweet yesterday after the race that anybody who didn't see Kevin Harvick getting a couple wins this season wasn't paying attention, because Harvick has been there pretty much the last 2 years. I mean, he struggled to get the win. He went 65 races without one, but he was still in the conversation throughout most of it. So not real surprising to see him get a couple here now that he's got, one under his belt again.
Yeah, you know what? What's surprising about that though is Harvick's always been kind of looked at as this villain, this bad guy. I think he's ruffled a lot of feathers over his career, but then you see a very good crowd response the last 2 weeks. I was at Michigan as well as I know you were.
Yep.
And we saw a great crowd response last week, and then again this week. I know NBC actually called some of that out on the broadcast too, which was cool to see. So
yeah, I think Harvick's kind of going through the Kurt Busch syndrome too. He's gotten older. He went on a long winless streak, and people learned to respect those drivers a little bit. Jimmy Johnson did the same thing his last couple seasons. I don't know if Kyle Busch will ever get there, but but Harvick sure has now. So, I think a lot of people really respect what Harvick did. We talked about it on the podcast last week a bit, Harvick's responses in the media center after the race. Harvick kind of is forgotten in the whole, taking over for Dale Earnhardt aspect. Dale Jr. gets a lot of that credit, but Harvick had to endure the same things as Earnhardt Jr. did without having the name to go along with it, So Harvick's been tried and true. He's been through it all, and I think the fans respect that now as he's getting into the later years of his career.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Absolutely.
So Harvick gets the win, but did not dominate this race by any means. Another one that he sealed the deal late in it. He's still, what did he lead? 55 laps on this, so no slouch in this, but 222 laps led by Joey Logano, who comes home with a 6th place finish after fading at the end. Old Joey looked like he was right up to the normal Penske performance at Richmond.
Yeah, and I have to say that I think as a whole, the Fords really showed up yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Ford has pretty much struggled most of the year, but at one point, I think I looked up and I saw all the Penske cars running right there together. If it wasn't all the Penske cars, it was like the top 4 were Fords, and then it was like Denny Hamlin in 5th. So the Fords, a stellar day yesterday. And then Joey Logano, like you said, Penske at Richmond, it's almost an unbeatable combination. So good for them to get back on track, and still 222 laps led is nothing to slouch about.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Christopher Bell coming at the end. One more lap, man, he would have had that race won. Definitely was on a roll. Not a lap led in this race, but definitely was a strong performer throughout it.
Definitely. I don't think Christopher Bell is a championship contender by any means, but he is showing that he's kind of coming into his own over there at Joe Gibbs Racing, and it's kind of interesting to see. We're seeing Kyle Busch maybe drop off the other side of that mountain at Joe Gibbs Racing. We're seeing Christopher Bell rise to the occasion, but there seems to be a good chemistry and a good momentum with that 20 car right now.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a youth surge there with that 20 car. Bell's been arguably the best JGR car the last 2 weeks. You could maybe argue Denny Hamlin was the best again this weekend out of those bunch, and another pit road issue relegates him to a fourth place finish, costing them another win here. I don't know what Denny's team has to do to get out of this funk, but right now Denny Hamlin's not costing them races, the team is, and if they want to make a run in the playoffs, they're going to have to do something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I give Denny a lot of credit. I haven't seen him dog his team yet.
Yeah.
Maybe that comes with maturity and experience in these situations.
Well, it might come with team ownership too,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a really good point. You see a lot of behind the scenes stuff when you're actually a team owner, but honestly, I hope for Denny's sake, I hope he has learned both as a driver and an owner. Because I think Denny is my pick to win the championship this year. That may be a hot take. It just seems like in a year that, which I think Chris Gabehart called them the best 24th place car or something along those lines.
Right.
It seems like Denny has had years where he's been dominant and you said, yep, he's going to win the championship that year, and it all falls apart. I almost just feel like it's kind of lining up to be that way, where it's been an off year kind of for Denny and that team, but it may be the year that they get the job done too.
So you think Denny's come into it as the favorite so many times that maybe it's time for him to come in as an underdog, and maybe that'll take the pressure off?
I do. Yeah. Like I said, might be a hot take, but that's what I'm going for.
I mean, I've been a proponent of Denny getting a championship along the last several years. I mean, that's pretty much the only thing he's got left in his career to get done. And I mean, he's said himself that he's not going to judge his own career on whether he gets that championship or not. I mean, a lot of people compare him to Mark Martin, and many will argue that Mark Martin's one of the greatest ever to drive a Cup car as well. But definitely that it's the one thing missing in the trophy case, I think, for Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But it is encouraging to see some of the runs they put together, and again, when they don't come together, he hasn't been on his team like in years past.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And certainly talking to him at Michigan after the race on Sunday or last Sunday, like you said, he commented on the fact that they keep making those mistakes, but it was we, not they. Mm-hmm. And that is a different mindset from Denny Hamlin than what we've seen. So maybe that is maybe it's a sign of maturity for him as well.
Absolutely.
The big focus, of course, heading into the final couple races before the playoffs is that playoff cutoff point. Martin Truex Jr. trails right now behind Ryan Blaney, who is second in points and hanging on by a thread as long as there's not another winner. Blaney was able to pull a little bit ahead of Truex this week. Of course, Truex ended up ahead of Blaney, but Blaney was able to get a few more points than Truex. So lengthens that gap a little bit more. I think Truex's mindset is to get a win anyway versus really trying to points his way in. Coming into a road course that Truex has a decent shot at, but Blaney's kind of an underdog favorite going into a road course as well. No wins. I mean, he only got the one win on a road course at the Roval, but certainly has been a threat at road courses. So you never know what could happen. And then of course Daytona, we all know what Daytona looks like. So, I mean, would you consider it a bad day for Truex losing those points, or at this point is it just win at all costs for him?
Oh, see, personally, I don't feel Blaney makes the playoffs.
Okay.
I just don't think the consistency is there. A lot of mistakes. Even if the playoff standings continue to look the way they look, I do think it's possible Blaney falls out on points.
Okay.
Now, I know he did have a better day than Truex yesterday. I just don't see the consistency and the strength in that 12 team right now.
Right.
I do think I can say Man, am I regretting not buying tickets to Daytona here in 2 weeks?
No kidding.
That, oh my God, that is going to be a wild race. I don't know. Maybe you and James have it in your budget that we could work some tickets out. I'd be happy to take a trip to Daytona here in a couple weeks. I do have
Yeah.
that weekend free. If you guys want to work that out.
There's a lot of red in our
Um,
budget.
Not even black, just red.
Oh, it's all red.
Um, so I think when it comes down to it, I know there's a lot of talk about, this week, maybe Chris Buescher is going to be a strong favorite to win at the Glen after his road course races this earlier this year. Personally, I don't feel that is the case. Now Buescher climbed out of the car yesterday and said, "Yep, I'm excited to go to the Glen," but Watkins Glen is such a different road course than Sonoma and Indianapolis,
Right.
where it's higher speed, and I don't think we're going to see that run out of Chris Buescher. I think this past week was probably his best shot, and if he won that race yesterday, oh my God, would it have been an upset of like, wow, that really shakes up the playoff
No
standings.
kidding. Oh, I was rooting for him, man. I want
Hmm.
chaos. So I was
For
I was
sure.
hoping he'd get there, but not quite.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So to circle back though, I do think Truex is in a better spot than Blaney. I think team wise, we've seen how the Toyotas have run, and we've also seen Joe Gibbs Racing, obviously very strong, as we just mentioned a minute ago. The 12 team, and along with Ford, have struggled to maintain consistency this year. So I don't see them uh, sitting in a positive spot as we move towards the playoffs.
I've got to say, I think if I had, it's funny to say this, but if I had to choose one of their places, I think I'd prefer to be where Truex is right now than where Blaney is, because Blaney's got to
Hmm.
watch in his rearview mirror so much too that
Right.
Truex has got nothing but positives, nothing but gains. That's all he's got to worry about is gaining.
Hmm.
And when you've got that
Right.
target right in front of you, he's only 26 points out. That's certainly doable, especially with the type of season we've seen Blaney have. It's been inconsistent. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm with you. I think that I kind of, as much as Blaney's been up there all season long, I kind of see Truex as the favorite going into playoffs as well. And of course, a win. I think Daytona is going to be chaos, and I would not be surprised to see Daytona, give us
Right.
that extra winner to make things more interesting. And you mentioned Chris Buescher having his best chance to be this weekend, but he's got a really good chance at Daytona too. But the problem is like 30 guys do. So
Hmm.
um, anything can happen there, and if we get a new winner there, obviously it turns everything on its head. But I would probably favor Truex's position over Blaney's right now for sure.
Yeah.
Kyle Busch manages where the heck did he finish? Ninth place finish. It's his first top 10 in a while. Kind of gets people maybe to stop talking about the fact that he's been so long without a top 10. If you don't want to count Pocono, where he was disqualified. But Kyle Busch was not without controversy in this race, as he was chastained, as he put it. Ross Chastain making contact with yet another driver uh, on a race weekend. You could argue not Chastain's fault. You could probably argue against Chastain. What were your thoughts on it, Derek? Who do you call that accident on?
uh, you know, Eric, I do put that on the shoulders of Ross Chastain. Now, in most cases, I would say that's just hard racing. He got squeezed, but unfortunately, he's developed this reputation of not knowing when to maybe lift and,
Yep.
and roll out of a bad situation. Right? It was a racing situation, but I've experienced, uh, you know, all week running iRacing that these cars just they naturally push, and that was about what, halfway through the race.
Right.
And I think Ross needed to know what he was doing in that position. Right. It wasn't a situation of the cars just squeezing together and coming together. It was, he went in there three wide, he washed up the track a little bit, and couple that with his reputation this year, and that's unfortunately on Ross, in my opinion.
Well, I think you mentioned it right there. It comes down to reputation, because when you're going every week and you're involved in one of these things, you lose the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
Even if it looks like it could be. I mean, even going back to the Christopher Bell thing last week, I think in any other driver involved in that incident with Bell, you go, yeah, that was Bell's fault. But it's really
Hmm.
easy to blame it on Chastain, because he's always in one of these. He can't get through a race weekend clean.
Absolutely. I I blamed it on Chastain when I saw it last
Yeah, I
weekend. You know, I
agree.
was sitting in the stands. And I know you were sitting in the press box, but you see the one car involved, and I'm not so sure that there wasn't a little bit of a right hook involved in that.
Yeah.
I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
if you saw it that way as well.
He
It
definitely was
it
staying
looked,
off the wall himself.
yeah, yeah. It looked like he may have been a little frustrated that he got squeezed and possibly finished Christopher Bell off. I don't know that for sure, but it just looked like there was a little more involved there than what needed to happen, I guess. So, but Ross has unfortunately developed a bad reputation this year, and
Yeah.
that's on him. Excuse me.
I'll take it though. It makes it more interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
I hope he keeps running into people. But yeah, I mean,
Right,
once you've got the reputation, it's hard to get rid of it. And like I said, he
for
cannot
sure.
seem to go through a race weekend with a clean slate.
Right,
And when it's every week that it happens, it starts to look like, hey, maybe it's not just luck.
right, right.
A
Definitely.
couple other drivers I wanted to mention in this one. Brad Keselowski comes out with a 15th place finish, but certainly ran better than that throughout the day. Didn't lead any laps, but got a 4th place finish in stage one. Good run for Keselowski and good run for Roush Keselowski, or Roush, whatever the heck it is, Keselowski, Fenway, Roush, whatever the hell the name of the team is. With Chris Buescher getting the 3rd place finish as well, and certainly making a good run for it against Harvick there at the end. So maybe turning a corner for those guys. Hopefully, as a Brad Keselowski fan, I'd like to see him get up there. And I mean, Brad's another one of those guys that's got Daytona experience and super speedway experience that could make things interesting at Daytona at just the right time for him. So good to see those guys have a good run.
Yeah, Eric, it's been a minute since I've been on a podcast, so I have all kinds of opinions that just kind of circulated in my head. I miss doing these podcasts. For the listeners out there, my buddy Clark and I, we did a Life in the Fans Lane podcast about a year ago. I have to say that Eric and James, this is a lot of work for you people listening out there. So I decided to back off ours, but I always enjoy getting on here and talking about racing. Now, with that being said, Brad Keselowski, I think his days as a driver are numbered.
Yeah.
I know that team is not up to snuff as a whole, but you can see the difference of what Chris Buescher has been able to do versus Brad Keselowski, and good for Chris Buescher and good for Keselowski too, right? Keselowski's going to transition into an ownership role fully, and his time will come to get out of that seat and put somebody in there that is going to drive the wheels off that thing. But to your point, it was really good to see him run well yesterday, for
Yeah,
sure.
it was nice to see that 6 car up front. That's for sure.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Eric Almirola kind of snuck in there at the end, made it look like he might be able to make some noise and sneak in another win to make the playoffs more interesting. So good run for him as well.
He would have won me $900 yesterday, Eric.
Nice.
I was a big Almirola fan, I got to say.
I would say again, Ty Gibbs once again impressed and solidified his resume a little bit more for that 18 car potentially for next season.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, had an engine problem and ended up finishing last in 36th, but certainly not indicative of the day that he ran. The 180 laps that he did get in were pretty good laps. And certainly was battling, heck, he was battling potentially the driver he's going to replace. So, and not backing down from Kyle.
How about that?
Right?
Yeah. How about that? That was an interesting battle right there.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe what we were seeing, but Kyle Busch had to be seething in that car.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Favorite of the show, Eric Jones, comes home 35th. He was running all right through the race, but was involved in one of the few accidents that we had in this one. I guess, Derek, one of the questions that I have for you is we've kind of seen Richmond slip as in popularity over the past few years. We've not seen a lot of great races at Richmond. A lot of people did not like the race in the spring here. I thought this race was compelling. It's not what I want out of Richmond, but it was still better than what we've seen lately there. What were your thoughts on the race overall? Were you happy with what we saw on Sunday, or would you like to see more?
I was happy with what I saw, but I go back to, and I don't know, you and James have probably talked about this before, but I believe that hardly any racetrack needs to have more than one date,
Yeah.
and Richmond absolutely falls into that category. I will say this: the crowd was pretty strong there yesterday, though. Looking at the stands, I thought, wow, kind of bare. But then you realize that that's one of the few tracks that actually still has stands all the way around the track,
Right.
with the exception of turn three and down the backstretch. Right, they used to have them down there,
They have taken
but
a
there's
lot out there, that's for sure.
they have, yeah, they have. But there's still a decent amount of people there. So
Yeah.
I was impressed with that. The race as a whole, though, I thought it was compelling. I thought the battles were pretty good. Not a ton of action for a track that used to label itself the action track or excitement
Right.
track, one of the two. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good race. A lot better than the Gen 6 days, and that's kind of the meter I put on races these days, right? I mean, at least we don't have the Gen 6 anymore, and don't have to race that car on a weekly basis.
Yeah. I still think it would help if we weren't shifting here, but I don't think shifting played a huge
Yes.
factor in it because I think everybody was so busy saving their tires.
Hmm.
I fear the day that they repave this place because that will, I think, ruin it. Once
Right.
again, I would like to see them cut it to one race a season and keep this August date because the heat and the daylight seems to have really helped it. I mean, we saw
Sure.
cars running the wall at Richmond. We haven't seen that in forever. So that was cool to see. And I mean, we want to see bumping and banging on a short track, but Richmond, if you really look at it, Richmond is barely a short track in the definition
Right.
of the name. So I don't know.
I think it's interesting too that there was this big push for getting Iowa a cup date for a while,
Yeah,
right? And Iowa and Richmond are almost identical racetracks.
right.
And just imagine we could be going there, as well. And it could be 3 or 4 dates a year that we're going to get this kind of racing. So
Yeah,
now, with that being said, I think Iowa would be great in terms of geographically. Put a race out there. We need to look at more in the Great Plains and out west, but
yeah,
as far as racetrack goes, it wouldn't add much for me.
yeah. It's kind of like a bigger, less exciting Richmond, which is not necessarily
Right,
good. So
right,
Indy cars are great.
exactly.
Iowa is perfect for Indy
Hmm.
cars. But NASCAR, I don't know, but I'm with you. I still would like to see a race out there. I think NASCAR, I mean, it was the first track that NASCAR owned officially.
Hmm.
And it's just sitting out there waiting to be used. And it seems like a pretty nice facility. So it'd be cool to see us go back out there with at least some stock cars, if not the Cup Series. But yeah, I mean, I was impressed with what I saw for what we've seen lately at Richmond. That's not exactly selling it really well, but it was better than
Right.
what we've seen in the past. And we're going to talk about the truck race in a second and really quick because that race sucked, in my opinion. And I was
Right.
much happier with Sunday's race than I was for the Truck Series race. But anything else with the Cup Series that you want to mention at all, Derek? Anything else worth discussing before we switch over to the Truck Series?
I don't think so. Not at this point. No.
Let's see. Austin Cindric was our highest finishing rookie in 12th place. Chase Elliott is your point standings leader by 116 points over Ryan Blaney. As we mentioned, Martin Truex Jr. is 26 points out of the playoffs. He would be passing Ryan Blaney at this point if he was to advance. Saturday night we had the Truck Series. That was the Worldwide Express 250 for carrier appreciation. Chandler Smith dominates this one. Leads 176 of the 250 laps. Ty Majeski leads the other 73. And oh, by the way, John Hunter Nemechek led one. And that was it. Those top three guys
Yeah.
led all your laps. And not a whole lot happened in this one. The biggest thing that I was looking for is I was waiting on every restart for Taylor Gray to get to the back of John Hunter Nemechek to repay him for IRP. He just never quite got there. So I think if he would have, would have been a little bit more interesting. But otherwise,
Sure.
not much of an exciting race here for the Truck Series.
Yeah. I will say one of the scariest moments of the race happened with that Ty Majeski pit stop. I don't
Yeah,
think I've ever seen that happen where a crew member, ended up, I guess, lying on the ground and got hit by a
right.
truck. I mean, that was, thank God that Ty saw it, right?
Yeah,
But first of all, it looked like the guy maybe hyperextended his knee, which is painful in itself.
right.
and then you take a Toyota Tundra bumper to the back, right? I mean that's not good either. So
And then they still made him sweep
um,
the lug nuts up. Come on,
maybe give that guy a break for a minute, all
right?
right? Let him go sit on the pit wall, catch his breath after he just got hit by a truck.
I'd hate to be him after
Um,
the adrenaline wears off. I'm sure he was a little sore.
yeah. I watched that video a couple times, and I'm trying to gauge how fast that truck was going, and I'd have to say that truck was still going anywhere from 5, 10, 15 miles an hour. So
Yeah.
imagine getting hit. I mean, it moved his body pretty well, but it could have been a lot worse too.
Yeah, as someone who stood on pit road, I mean, you definitely underestimate with the cars going as fast as they are. You underestimate how quick they're still going on pit road, and of course, Richmond is a slower pit road because it's a short track. But still, man,
Sure.
I wouldn't want to get hit by one of those things.
No, negative. I will pass on that.
I mean, you would never catch me running out in front of one of those cars. Those guys are all insane. Mad props to all of them for what they do. But yeah, a good job by Ty Majeski to have the foresight to hit the brakes and stop sooner. I mean, there's only so much he can do there in that situation, and yeah,
Yeah,
definitely could have been a much worse situation. Definitely a scary situation. It just reminds you that pit road's a dangerous place.
for sure. For sure. Now, I will say one of the only action moments in that race, and I only caught a little bit of it. I was actually racing myself on iRacing. But I think his name is Nick Lights. And Nick comes from iRacing.
Okay,
And it was his second Truck Series start. We've actually raced together in a league on iRacing.
nice.
So that's kind of cool to see him getting that opportunity there. From what I saw on that replay, though, it looked like he may have chopped. I'm trying to think who it was, who he ran across the nose of. But anyways, backed it in the wall pretty hard. But regardless, it's pretty cool to see him getting an opportunity with some sponsorship on the truck too. So I believe Nick has raced stock cars in real life before that. But whenever you kind of run into somebody on iRacing like that, it's cool to see them get an opportunity. So
Yeah, it's definitely cool, and that's one of the things you get in this truck series a lot too. Is you get a lot more of that. I'm going to mention in my shout outs later in the episode that I was out at Berlin Raceway Wednesday night to watch the late models out there, and we saw Ty Majeski and Carson Hocevar and race in that race, which was pretty cool. In addition to William Byron and Eric Jones, who were out there as well. So, yeah, you get a chance to see these guys running the series, especially the guys toward the back that are fighting for their chance to advance their careers that you'll see at your local short track. So, very cool to see the opportunities
yeah,
people get in the truck series.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of opportunities in the truck series, wouldn't it be cool to see a truck race at Berlin?
That would be
Count me
awesome.
in.
That would be awesome. I think they need to finish that wall along the back stretch, which
Yes.
would be sad because that's one of the things that makes Berlin so great. But
Right.
I don't see the truck series racing on a track without a wall at this point. But
Right.
the ARCA series races out there, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely.
I'm on the team SRX at Berlin bandwagon as well. I really like
Yeah.
CDS. I think that track would be perfect for the SRX series for sure.
As do I, and it would bring a lot to that area too, right?
Yeah.
To
Oh
to
yeah.
get a bunch of champions in there, and not far from Grand Rapids, it would provide a little nightlife for them as well. So I think that'd be cool.
And there's some big names that have raced
Um,
there. We've had Kyle
yeah,
Busch race there. We've had a bunch of Cup drivers race there. Of course, Johnny Benson owned the place for
yeah,
a while. So
yep,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history there. So wrapping up with the truck
yeah.
series now, we've got Chandler Smith locked into the playoffs as well with Grant Enfinger now as we go into one more race to end the round of 8. Carson Hocevar and Ben Rhodes, no, not Ben Rhodes, Christian Eckes hanging out outside the cutoff right now for the round of 8. Bummers.
So speaking, so I was just going to say, Eric. Speaking of Carson Hocevar,
Yeah.
I don't think you have this in your notes. It's more of a rumor than anything. But what do you think of the kind of back and forth rumor of Carson Hocevar maybe teasing a move to the 9 car in Xfinity?
It'd be interesting for sure. I think, the kid's got some talent. He hasn't gotten a win in the truck series yet. He certainly has shown it outside of the truck series. He's certainly shown it in the truck series that he's capable. We've seen other drivers that, we saw Daniel Hemrick win a championship in the Xfinity series before, winning his first race to get that championship. So just because he hasn't gotten the win yet doesn't mean he doesn't have the skill to do it. I'd love to see him move up to the Xfinity Series. That 9 car is going to be a coveted ride there with the way Junior Motorsports has been performing. So
Yeah.
just to be in the conversation for that ride is a pretty big deal. So
Yeah.
it's surprising to see him outside of the cutoff right now at this point.
For sure. And I think that brings, and I guess I should ask first, is there a time limit on this podcast?
No, heck no.
Okay. All right. Good deal. I want to make sure, we're not on some time limit here.
Nope.
I love to talk, especially about racing.
It's all good.
But yeah. So one thing that's interesting, right, with, that 9 car being vacated and most likely the sponsorship, going with it. I'm curious who that brings in terms of sponsorship to the 9 car, if that is Carson Hocevar, right? I don't think Carson Hocevar has a bunch of sponsorship behind him, right? He has, I think, what is it, that Premier Security Company behind him. But moving from trucks to Xfinity is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Junior Motorsports might have the money to fund a driver who doesn't have the sponsorship behind him. But from what I've heard, Dale Jr. is pretty cheap and not going to put up the money. They're going to have sponsorship to run that car.
Right.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I've also heard rumors of Drew Dollar to that car.
I heard that as well.
Which Drew Dollar, I believe, has sponsorship support, but man, to me, that would be a waste of a seat. No offense to Drew Dollar. Well, maybe offense to Drew Dollar. He hasn't done anything to impress me yet.
Right.
He's torn up. If he's going to go run for Junior Motorsports, they better increase their equipment budget because he's torn up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, the Drew Dollar thing is really interesting. I mean, I think it just shows the state of the sport, right? Of sponsorship and getting a ride, and Drew Dollar has not really done anything in ARCA or truck. No. And I think for him to move up to Xfinity is going to cost Junior Motorsports a lot of bench sheet metal.
Yep, I agree. I think if I was to choose between Carson Hocevar without sponsorship and Drew Dollar with, I would probably still choose Carson Hocevar.
Yes. It's going to cost you less in the long run.
I mean, not that Hocevar's, hasn't made his share of mistakes. He got himself into a run-in that potentially could have been penalized at IRP by wrecking a slower car.
Probably should have.
Yeah. He made some mistakes even out in the late model at Berlin this weekend. That cost himself a couple laps. So he's not perfect, but yeah, I think there's a lot of talent and a lot of potential there with that kid, especially with the way he's continued to perform, except the last couple of races, even with the leg injury. It didn't slow him down a bit.
Yeah. So. And I also think it's important to remember that Carson is only 19 years old, right? Yeah. I think we gauge that off of, and I just had to do a quick search because I'm thinking, is he only 19?
Right.
But he is only 19, and I think we gauge maybe someone like Carson Hocevar off of Ty Gibbs, who is also 19.
Yeah.
And obviously the talent level is not talent level, but the success rate is a lot different there. Which, by the way, I will say for listeners of the podcast, if you have not went and listened to the Ty Gibbs episode of the Dale Jr. Download, it was actually a very good episode. I'm not a Ty Gibbs fan per se myself. But I thought it was very well done, and I think he presents himself very well.
I gained a lot of respect for him with that podcast. I just finished listening to it this morning. Yeah, definitely more respect for the kid. He's got a good head on his shoulders.
I wish he wouldn't interrupt Dale and Mike so much. That was one thing that drove me crazy towards the end of it. But it is what it is, I guess, in that standpoint.
So the Truck Series is off for a bit now after this race. The Xfinity Series returns to action this weekend at Watkins Glen. We'll talk about all those coming up here shortly. Highest finishing rookie in this race for the Truck Series, Corey Heim, with a 5th place finish. Chandler Smith is your points leader, 2 points over Zane Smith as we head into the next race, the final race of the first round of the playoffs, which is Kansas on September 9th. So a couple weeks off for them.
Wow, that seems like forever.
I know, right?
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. This Truck Series, man, they hit the playoffs so early, and there's just huge gaps between the races. So
definitely,
it's always like that. There's either a bunch of gaps way at the beginning or a bunch of gaps at the end.
Hmm.
crazy they can go a month just about without a race. But
For sure.
there you go. Some news to discuss. You mentioned the 9 car in the Xfinity Series. The reason that that's open is we got our announcement, as James and I hinted at on Monday when we recorded last week, that or I think it was Tuesday we recorded last week. Noah Gregson's been announced the driver of the 42 for 2023. He'll join Eric Jones over there at RPM GMS, or Petty GMS, I think is what the team's called. I think this is a positive move for everybody involved. I think everybody wins in this deal. What are your thoughts on the move, Derek?
So I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I realized I started talking about the 9 and the 40, or not the 42, but I kind of alluded to the 9 being vacated. I did hold a little bit back here, though. So I think it's a great opportunity for Noah Gragson.
Yeah.
Do I think he's ready? I don't know. He needs to make sure he finishes races in the Cup Series that he's in, right?
Right.
In that colleague car this year, it has not been an easy go of it. But the second thing, and I think the really interesting thing about this is the part I kind of held back because I didn't want to ruin the topic here. Who sponsors that 42 car next year, right?
Right.
Do we see the same list of sponsors that we've seen? Is it Black Rifle Coffee that is also sponsoring the 42 this year? No. I feel like it's a competitive coffee company to Black Rifle.
And from what I understood from Noah Gragson talking, is that he is in this ride as Noah Gragson, not as Noah Gragson, here's the money I'm bringing with me.
Sure.
So I don't know that he's got much sponsorship necessarily following him to this car. So
yeah. So I just did a quick search. It is Black Rifle Coffee.
Okay.
That's the same sponsor as Noah Gragson, correct?
There you go. Yeah.
Am I going crazy
Yep.
here?
No,
I'm
right.
just thinking
right.
like, so
I don't know. I don't ever see the 42 car because Ty Dillon hasn't done anything in it. So
right. Except wreck.
Right.
Now I will say there was a sweet piece of sheet metal, a Ty Dillon sheet metal that I from the Atlanta race. I almost bought it. It was pretty damn cool for a good price. So
it should be pretty cheap. There's probably lots of it available.
$300 for a nose. I mean, you kidding me? Come on
bad.
now. So I guess that maybe answers part of that. But I personally don't see Black Rifle stepping up for a full year, right?
No.
So we've seen Allegiant on that car. We've seen, Ferris, I think, on that car recently. So I think that is a possibility. But my big question here is, how about Bass Pro Shops? Bass Pro Shops is a huge supporter of Noah Gragson, right?
Right.
Does Bass Pro say, okay, we're going to sponsor 3 cars, or does this take another big hit to Richard Childress Racing and say, we're going to pull our sponsorship off of the 3 car and we're going to put it on the 9 car, right? I think Johnny Morris of Bass Pro Shops I think he's all in on Noah Gragson. What has Austin Dillon done, right?
Right.
He has a reality TV show that doesn't really necessarily scream Bass Pro Shops,
right?
With his skinny jeans and his reality show mantra, right?
Right.
But I think that's an interesting side of it, right? Of does he bring Bass Pro Shops? Where does that sponsorship come from? I think is it? I'm trying to think. What's the owner of Allegiant? The other the GMS, Mike Beam. Is that his name?
Maury Gallagher.
Maury Gallagher. I want to say Maury Gaunt, but that was Gaunt Brothers.
Yep. I just looked that up because I was pretty sure that Allegiant was owned by GMS essentially.
Sure. So I think it's going to see blocks of sponsorship, but I do think the piece in my mind is, what does Bass Pro Shops do,
right.
And who do they go with? I don't see them pulling themselves off the 19. That's for sure. So
no, I think they've got a good relationship with Truex, and I don't think you see that break up at all. So
for sure, I would say maybe they have a better relationship with Richard Childress over Austin Dillon, from,
right?
Maybe just what I've seen, but Noah Gragson to the 42. I think it's the only move that Noah could make.
Yeah.
I think good for him. The results need to start stacking up.
Yeah, there certainly wasn't room at Hendrick. The likelihood of going somewhere with Gibbs was probably pretty slim. This puts him in a pretty decent ride, I think, and really, I think Petty GMS is really on the upswing. I think with the experience now that Eric Jones is becoming more of a veteran, paired with Noah Gragson as a young driver. I think it'll be good. I'm with you. Noah shows me a lot of maturity, and at times I'm like, yeah, this kid is totally ready for the Cup Series. And then he does stuff like what he did, earlier this season on the road course where he wrecks half the field, and you go,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. Or he shotguns a beer on the front stretch after puking after winning a race. So
Right.
I don't know. I think the personality though, Noah wants to be. He wants to be a modern day. What the heck's his name? I can't. Tim Richmond. So
Yes.
he's on his way to that, I guess. And that type of personality, we could use it in the Cup Series. We could use any personality we can have in the Cup Series. So I'm excited to see him get a shot in the Cup Series and see what he has for us. So
Yeah, I do think he will be good for the Cup Series. Absolutely.
Of course, it is that time of year. Lots of contract talk this week. Bubba Wallace also announced he signed a multi-year agreement with 23XI to keep him in the 23 car. I think that helps get rid of any questions about at least his status with Tyler Reddick being signed to that team. Tyler Reddick won't be going to the 23 car. Just puts a bigger target on either the 45 car or potentially, which I think is what's going to happen, is likely another charter for that team down the road. I think Denny's pretty set on having at least 3 cars in the next couple of years. So,
Yeah.
if not more, I think that 23XI could play a pretty big role in where Kyle Busch ends up too. And we'll talk about him in a second, but,
Mm-hmm.
good on Bubba to get that extension. I think Bubba's finally starting to live up to expectations, with that team. Obviously had a really good run at Michigan. Good to see some good things coming to him. I personally think Bubba's a personality we need in the sport. I've been a fan of him in the sport all along. And just the biggest thing is I'm glad that he's living up to that image that NASCAR wants to portray with him,
Yeah, I'm happy to see Bubba get a contract extension. The performance, you're absolutely right, is starting to move in that direction of being a top tier driver. I will say he needs to act like a top tier
Right.
driver now. I'll be honest, that drove me crazy last week when he climbed out of the car at Michigan and pouted the entire time. And I do think Bubba is so good for the sport, but he with that comes the responsibility of being a leader for different fandoms, right?
What he did at Michigan was endearing back at Daytona when he finished second or third or whatever it was. It's not endearing anymore when he's been in it as long as he has.
Absolutely. You have to lead by example and be pumped up for your team and your sponsors, and you can't just get out and pout about it. I'd have to look back on that interview. I was at the track, so I didn't hear it all. But kind of when he went down the poor me route, I kind of just rolled my eyes and stopped listening. Right. But it was a great day for McDonald's and all his other sponsors and supporters that he really gave a lot of TV time to. Right. But you can't get out and act like that when you've had such a good day. So happy for the contract extension. But I'm hoping Denny Hamlin, and I'm sure they have, Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan take them under their wing and say, hey, man, you got to act like a champion to be a champion, right? So I hope that's the case.
I think Bubba really wears his heart on his sleeve, too, and I think we'll see – I don't think we'll see that go away either. I will say that, being down on pit road and getting a chance to talk to him after the TV interviews, by the time he got to the rest of the media, he had – kind of backed out of that a little bit and kind of snapped to, hey, this was a good run. I mean, he was still disappointed, but definitely had a little bit better attitude after the TV cameras moved away. So it's a heat of the moment thing too. I don't hold too much against him, but at the same time, like I said, if he's going to do it every time he gets a second place finish, it's going to get pretty old pretty fast. So definitely needs to be a little bit more gracious in losing. So
absolutely.
Speaking of drivers who are not gracious in losing, let's talk Kyle Busch a little bit. Kyle continues to be the talk of the silly season in the Cup Series. I got a little bit of an insight from his pre-race media this week, kind of hinting at what he would like to see the end of his career look like. He said I've got 6, 7, maybe 8 more years. He says if I play this all out perfectly, Brexton and I will share a truck when he turns 16 years old, and then it's his when he's 18, and I'm done. James and I talked previously, and I've talked a lot that there's obvious plans of Brexton being the heir apparent for the Truck Series team and Kyle Busch Motorsports. So no shock there, but interesting to see kind of where Kyle's vision is and how far out he's planned this. And not surprising at all to see him wanting to share a ride with his son to end his career. What do you think of Kyle's thoughts there?
How cool, right? I
Right?
mean, how cool of a thing to be able to do as a father son moment, right? I think it's cool that my dad and I get to go to the race together, and my dad's not handing over a multi-million-dollar race truck to me, right?
Right.
So, very cool though. I mean, as much crap as Kyle Busch catches, I am a Kyle Busch fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hated him, but I've learned to respect him and look at how good he is for the sport. So honestly, when I first read those comments, my excitement came from him saying, "I'll be around 5, 6, 7, 8 more years,"
I agree.
because he's so good for the sport, and
Yeah.
and he's a polarizing figure. When you take somebody to a race for a first time and you see a wreck that involves Kyle Busch, and the crowd goes wild, right? I mean, people lose their minds, right? And it's
Yep.
it's it's kind of a fun part of it. You have the villain in every sport, in every aspect of life, and I was just excited to see Kyle Busch will be around, and he will be. I mean, he's going to have a ride, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but to be able to plan that out, and share that truck or give that truck over to Brexton, I think that is very cool. And share the truck, right? If you can, how cool is that? It's almost similar to what Joe Nemechek and John Hunter Nemechek did.
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Very cool. James and I have talked like ad nauseum about what we think the Kyle Busch's fate is in this whole contract negotiation, and it changes every week because our opinions change and different things come out, and different things he says in interviews bring more hints with it. But you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it, Derek. What are your thoughts on Kyle? Where do you think Kyle ends up next year? Do you think he's going to solidify things with JGR? Do you think he goes somewhere else? And if he does go somewhere else, where do you think he ends up?
Ooh, man. Um,
$1 million question,
so
right?
yeah. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and quite honestly, whenever I see a tweet come out from Adam Stern, with Sports Business Journal, I'm like, oh, does he have a ride yet, right?
Right.
And it's like this weird like obsession of like, where's Kyle Busch going? Um, but it goes back to what I just said about how he is important for the sport. Um, where do I think Kyle Busch is going? I do not think he'll end up back with JGR. I think that ship has sailed. I think that ship was leaving the port before Kurt Busch got hurt.
Yep.
But now that Ty Gibbs has slid in there and has done well, why wouldn't you, if you're Joe Gibbs Racing and Monster Energy and all the other sponsors involved, say, okay, we're going to slide Ty Gibbs in for a much cheaper price, and he's shown he can get the job done, instead of trying to button this up with Kyle Busch.
Well, that's the thing.
So,
If you're Joe Gibbs, you have no reason to get this done quickly with Kyle because you've got your backup
right,
plan. You're set.
right, right. Yeah, you're essentially doing this for Kyle, right?
Yep.
This is not a mutually beneficial transaction anymore.
Yep.
This is for Kyle Busch to remain in the 18 car. So the second part of your question, where do I think he ends up? Now, I'm sure you've listened to all the podcasts, and it seems maybe the 41 car at Stewart-Haas Racing is maybe the leading candidate.
Right.
I know Colleague has been thrown around. I just don't see him going to the 41 car. I don't know. I mean, I think I would put my eggs in the basket of Colleague over Stewart-Haas, because Matt Colleague has shown that he's not afraid to spend money to have success. He can also, from what I've seen, fund a car on his own if he wants to.
Yeah, he's definitely got the money to do it.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Well, first of all, where do you guys think he's going to go?
James has been very much team Stuart Haas. Of course, James being a Tony Stewart fan would love to see that disruption.
Right.
I think the Ford aspect is really interesting because I think from a truck series standpoint, it gives Ford competitive trucks with KBM,
right.
which Ford hasn't had in the truck series in several years, pretty much since Brad Keselowski Racing went out. I honestly think the more I hear and the more I see that they find a way to put him in a 2311 car. I think
Really? Okay.
I think Toyota is going to do everything they can to keep Kyle. And I think that Denny's got the space for him there. If they can secure charters, I think Kurt Busch's situation definitely makes things more interesting because that could certainly give them a year. If Kurt chooses not to come back, that could give them a year to play with Kyle. So
you think they expand? You think 2311 expands?
I think 2311 is expanding anyway. I mean, obviously they're going to expand to get Tyler Reddick in there. I don't think Tyler Reddick's coming in to replace Kurt Busch after a year.
Ooh, really?
I personally think that Tyler Reddick is coming into a third car there. I think that 45 is in play for somebody. So I think Denny's really hedging his bets on the TV contract and maybe additional charters or charters becoming available. Rick Ware Racing, who knows?
$20 million a charter, as we heard last week.
Right. But, I mean, he's got MJ behind him too. So
right.
Who knows what happens there. I think right now with what's going on with Kurt, I think it makes it a lot more interesting because it certainly makes it logical for Kyle to slip into that 45 ride. Obviously, there's a conflict there with Monster Energy and Rowdy Energy.
Yep.
But I think you could overcome that pretty easily, especially with Ty Gibbs if he goes over to the 18 car.
Right.
Because I'm assuming that Monster's going to go with him.
Stays there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know. Right now nothing would surprise me. I think I'm with you. I think I favor a colleague over Stuart Haas. But
I don't think the performance is there long term in that 41 car.
I don't
Maybe it's
think
a Cole
so
Custer
either.
problem, but I just that car has never been competitive.
If it was a Cole Custer problem, then everybody at Stuart Haas would be winning,
right.
except Cole Custer, and they're not. I mean, obviously Harvick's got 2 wins in a row,
right.
but he wasn't winning previous to that. So I don't know. I think Colleague is in for the long haul. I think just like GMS is. I think that's a team that to watch. But yep. I would not be surprised at all to see. I think Denny shook the world when he signed Reddick, and I would not be surprised to see Denny do the same thing with Kyle.
So let me ask you this. What do you think about the rumors of Kyle Busch possibly going back to Hendrick?
I mean, again...
Have you heard those rumors?
I have, and nothing would surprise me. If you're looking at team owners who could fund a car or fund a driver of Kyle Busch's caliber, Hendrick is on the short list.
But obviously there's no room at the end.
No.
Right? So everything that I've heard is if that were to happen, obviously Alex Bowman is out.
Right.
Now I've sat here and and thought about that of like, there is no way in hell Ally, whose slogan is "Do it right," is going with Kyle Busch.
No.
Right. But then when you think about it, you almost look at kind of the movement, like the musical chairs of sponsorship, right? I can absolutely see Ally, 2 things. I can see Ally sliding over to someone like William Byron, right? Mm-hmm. And then Exalta going to Kyle Busch. But that would have to be a fully funded Exalta car, no Liberty. I think Liberty is attached to William Byron, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And at that point, who else is there for sponsorship, right?
Yeah.
So we have the 9, the 24, the 48.
See, the problem with this, and maybe you're going there, but you're assuming then that Alex Bowman is done. But Alex Bowman has still got wins. He's still a playoff driver. Mm-hmm. Does he go somewhere else? Does he go to somewhere like Colleague or Stuart Haas? And does he take Ally with him? Is Ally attached to him?
That's a good point. I do think Ally is attached to Alex Bowman. I think Ally and Alex Bowman work very well together. I would not see that partnership splitting up. So that was going to be my second point of Ally would have to be ready to jump ship.
Right.
Now, I don't think Ally's results, or I'm sorry, Alex Bowman's results have been what Ally is looking for. But I also don't think Ally is ready to pull the plug on Alex Bowman. That could be another wrench that is thrown into things as well, though.
Well, let
But
me throw you another
does Alex
curveball.
Bowman go to Colleague, right?
Well,
So
let me throw you another curveball. Who
yep.
was a big proponent of Alex Bowman replacing Dale Earnhardt Jr.? It was Dale Earnhardt Jr. Who's looking to get a charter and get start a Cup Series team?
Dale Earnhardt Jr.
There you go. So who knows? I mean, I'm just throwing it. I have no knowledge behind that whatsoever, but it's just another interesting wrinkle.
I love the silly season talk and
right.
Really everything falls on Kyle Busch's shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Wherever Kyle Busch goes, the dominoes fall.
Yeah.
And it's kind of exciting. Like I would love to see Kyle Busch stay in the 18. I mean, but I think it's also a very similar thing that maybe happened to Matt Kenseth, right? When Matt was done. And so I know you have another comment regarding the Kyle Busch situation. So I'll let you get into that because we're kind of rolling into the sponsorship talk of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Daniel Suarez told Nate Ryan on NBC Sports this week. He says, I believe Kyle has a very big resume on his back that supports him a lot. But even with that, he's struggling. He's lost his main sponsor of many, many years. And now the team, in my opinion, hasn't done a good job selling him. They've known that M&M's is leaving for a long time and they haven't been able to find anything. I find that surprising. Very interesting comments by Daniel Suarez toward a former team of his. Somebody who let him fly,
That's as spicy as Mexican food right there.
Exactly.
Spicy as a Mexican platter. That is those are surprising comments, and I think that says Daniel Suarez is still a little butthurt over what happened over at Stewart-Haas.
Yeah. One other thing too worth noting, and that is that the actual article is about Suarez being close on his own extension, but they end up talking about Kyle and sponsorship and all that stuff. So
that comment is much more interesting than any contract extension.
Exactly. I mean, Suarez really hasn't even been in the talk of silly season. Mm-hmm. I think everybody's pretty confident that he's going to be back in that car. He's pretty much shown that he's
right.
That Trackhouse is really behind him, and he's with Trackhouse, and I think for him to go anywhere else would be crazy because he's definitely got himself his best situation of his career where he's at right now.
So do we agree with Suarez's comments though?
Yeah, I think JGR. I think it's another one of those instances where, like I mentioned earlier, they've got such a good backup plan, especially now that when Truex re-signed, that got rid of any uncertainty. Now they've got their backup plan in Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs was going to fill whatever role didn't get filled, and now he's there to step in, and he's proven the past 3 weeks that he's capable, especially when he's battling with Kyle on Sunday at Richmond. I think he's shown that Joe Gibbs has nothing to lose by just stringing Kyle along and lowballing Kyle into a deal or letting Kyle walk because he's got somebody to fill that spot. And it gets rid of a problem for Joe Gibbs because Kyle alluded this weekend that he doesn't want to do this again in a couple of years. He wants this to be the last time he's doing this negotiation for his career. So he's looking for a long-term contract, and he's already said that he's willing to take less money. So that's obviously the sticking point is the long-term contract with Joe Gibbs.
Right.
So if Kyle walks, it gets rid of a problem because Ty is coming, and Joe doesn't want Ty driving for a different team. He wants him driving for his. So, I agree. I think they didn't do enough, but I don't think that was unintentional.
Yeah, it's just it's really added a wrinkle into things, and to hear Daniel Suarez say that, obviously, again, I think he's a little butthurt on it,
right?
But just an interesting time to make comments like that.
Yeah.
But especially when he's found himself in a much better position than what he was. So
yeah. One thing you added before we started the podcast, a great article by our friend Adam Stern at Sports Business Journal. Brands are getting more exposure since the number was pushed forward in the Cup Series on the doors. I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on the number change or the number move. James and I were very much against it at the beginning of the season, and I know he still hates it because he hates anything new. But I have come to forget that it even was a thing. I watched the cars on the track for the first time in person at Michigan last weekend. Didn't even barely notice that they're in a different place. And to me, I think everybody benefits because the numbers are still there. They're still nice and big, and the sponsors are very visible compared to what they used to be. And obviously, according to this article, they're happy. So, what are your thoughts on the numbers?
Yeah, I'm also someone that does not really like change. I think we're all creatures of habit. But surprisingly, this did not really bother me that much. I think if a team and a sponsor did the design well, I think it looked really good.
Yep.
There's some out there that are pretty piss poor, that really need to kind of work on their design capabilities.
But they were probably a
Um,
crappy design when the number was on the door, too.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So, it's I did not really care that much. And I look at just the change as a whole, right? As the car, and there's so much that's different about it. The way
Right.
it looks, the way it races, the way it, I know it was explained on the broadcast this week about how the car essentially hikes up in the air, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to get air to the diffuser. I think that is it's so much different than anything I've ever seen with these cars since I've been watching NASCAR. So really, it's a very small change with a bunch of changes, right? So it's very interesting to see the different perspectives on it. Personally, I'm a fan of it, though. I think, again, if it can be done, or if you do it well, I think it's okay. So,
Yeah, if you can increase the
um,
visibility of the sponsors, I think it's a good
mhm.
thing. And you made a point there about how well NBC explained it this weekend, and it just goes to show you the quality of the Fox broadcast when we're 24 weeks into the season and we're just getting the explanation of these cars finally, thanks to NBC.
Yeah,
So, um,
yeah, it's night and day difference, isn't it?
they NBC does such a great job, and I think it was. I think it was Jeff Gluck's podcast this week that gave them credit for breaking down the strategy and everything on Sunday at Richmond and doing the same at Michigan as well. And Steve Letarte is so good at breaking down those strategies. He's a great person to have in the booth. They've just got such a good team there at NBC that I wish we could have him every week.
Me too. Me too. And that's a whole other thing, right, with the TV deal.
Right.
But yeah, to touch on this article, I mean, when you're talking about the brand exposure being up 15%, I mean, that's a big deal, right? For a sport that is driven by sponsorship.
Well, especially
But
when
then,
we're talking about sponsorship the way we are, and we're talking
yeah,
about M&M's leaving,
hmm
and we don't have those sponsors that sponsor a car all year long like we used to
right.
have. Anything that gives them more value is great.
Yeah, and then so 15%, but then further down in the article, it says when you're talking about cars outside of the top 10, the viewership increase is at 36%.
That's
That
incredible.
that's a that's a big jump for some of those cars that really need that sponsorship
Yep.
money. So I think it's great to see that. And as you mentioned, when we talk about sponsorship dollars coming into the sport and trying to attract sponsors, I know that Formula One is the big deal right now, especially, excuse me, among younger people, right?
Right.
But if you're a brand, in NASCAR numbers far outweigh F1 and any other series in the United States still, racing series. If you're a brand and you see an opportunity to sponsor a race car, are you going to sponsor a vehicle that looks like a Formula One or an Indy car with very limited sponsorship, or are you gonna look at a race car that has optimal sponsorship opportunities and viewership, and look in the direction of NASCAR, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's good for the sport too. So
The only reason I'm choosing F1 over NASCAR is if I want the worldwide exposure.
sure,
If
yeah,
I'm
that's a good
looking
point.
if I'm looking US, it's definitely NASCAR. Obviously, they've got these big beautiful billboards on the track, every weekend. And like you said, the Formula One car, IndyCar, they've done a really good job of completely branding those cars to where you can tell by the paint scheme, what sponsorship they have. But it's just not the same level of exposure that you get in the NASCAR series. Even if you were to equal ratings out, you're just so much more visible in a stock car than you are in an open wheel car.
They have to work a lot harder in an open wheel car to make those sponsorships work, in my opinion.
Yep, exactly.
So great numbers. I mean, that was, like you said, I kind of saw that article about a half hour before we started the show here, and it's very encouraging to see. I know it's a divisive topic among NASCAR fans. I would have to argue that probably most don't care anymore.
Right.
But it makes it that much better when you know that the entities that are supporting and driving our sport are the ones that are seeing a big return on it.
Yeah, when you see those type of numbers, it's kind of hard to argue with the change.
Mm-hmm.
So
you hear that, James? When you're listening back, you need to change your opinion and get on board.
He's listening.
Come on board, buddy.
He's going to listen to this podcast because he is so afraid that somebody's going to do better than him and take his job.
Well, I think it's best we leave that up to the listeners.
There you
go. I got no say on that, but James, you look over your shoulder. Listeners, we appreciate you hanging in there with us tonight.
There you go. With that, we head into Watkins Glen this weekend. Back to the road course. Feels like we've been on road courses a lot this year, because we have. But going to a traditional one we've raced on for a long time, and arguably one that's not very similar to most of the ones that we've run so far. James did send me picks earlier in the day, so I will give you guys James and my picks, and then Derek will let you pick somebody as well for the two races this weekend.
So real quick, Eric, before you jump into picks, I do have my picks here, but how do you guys do picks? Do they have to be points paying drivers for each race?
So the way we do it is we keep point standings between James and I, which is actually interesting to mention because what we do is we earn the number of points that driver earns in the race each week.
Sure.
So you don't have to pick a driver in that series, but if you don't get the points, so it doesn't really matter. So basically we pick points paying drivers. I was able to, James beat me this week by 2 points, which makes we are 1 point apart in the point standings this season. James is behind me by 1 point, which gives
barn burner.
Yeah, it gives him the first pick. So I went 2 weeks in a row earlier with drivers being DQ'd. Because I had I don't remember who the heck it was in the truck series that got DQ'd, and then the next week Kyle Busch got DQ'd. So I lost points 2 weeks in a row, and James took a massive lead, and I've managed to come back to a couple points away from him, or a couple points ahead of him last couple weeks. So NASCAR Xfinity Series has an unsponsored race at Watkins Glen on Saturday this weekend. James is going out on a limb, and he is choosing AJ Allmendinger as his pick. I have to make sure real quick because we are not allowed to pick the same driver 2 times in a row. I want to make sure that I do
So
not.
while you're looking that up,
Yes.
I also saw that the race was unsponsored, and I was surprised.
Yeah.
But I was doing a little research on my picks here, and I don't know why J-Ski hasn't updated it yet, because it was updated on August 2nd. Like if you dig a little bit, kind of buried in there. Screwball Whiskey sponsoring the race.
That's funny because
Saturday.
NASCAR doesn't have it updated on their website either, because that's where I got the name from. Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know why that is, but that is the information I saw, that Screwball Whiskey will be sponsoring that race. Let me make sure it's not from last year, I guess. But while I'm doing that, are you a Screwball Whiskey fan?
No,
Eric?
No, I'm not an alcohol fan in general, so no.
Okay. I feel like when I started dabbling in whiskey a little bit. You know what? That was from last year. I don't know why you put that link right there, but you're right. Unsponsored race.
There you go.
I started dabbling in some of the flavored whiskey, and now I'm like, I really drink that stuff. Yeah, I don't know, but just super sweet,
Right.
But anyways, yes, it is unsponsored.
So since James went out on a limb with AJ Allmendinger, I'm also going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to go with a driver who has a win here, and I'm going Ty Gibbs as my pick here for the Xfinity Series. Who you got in the Xfinity Series on Saturday, Derek?
Ooh, Xfinity Series. I'll give you my pick that wouldn't get me any points first.
Okay.
I was going to go with Kyle Larson
Okay.
on Saturday. But because he's not going to get any points, I'm going to go with Justin Allgaier.
There you go. Justin Allgaier, I
Yep.
believe, has, at least in the last 4 races, has the best average finish here.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Definitely a good pick.
Yep.
James also going out on a limb with the Go Bowling at the Glen on Sunday for the Cup Series with Chase Elliott. So I'm going to counter with the driver who's won the last 2 road course races and choose Tyler Reddick as my pick. Derek, who do you got in the Cup Series?
I was going to go Tyler Reddick until I saw that you picked him. I'm going to go Kyle Larson on this race because he will get points for this one. So I do think Larson is a solid pick for Sunday.
That's my thought with Reddick too. I would be shocked to see him win 3 road courses in a row. I do believe this is Chase Elliott's track, but James got the first pick, so he got Chase, and I think Tyler's going to get me points, so I'll take him.
We could be seeing kind of the same trajectory that Chase Elliott had, right?
Yeah.
Kind of being a dominant force on road courses. 2 things. Number one, have you ever been to Watkins Glen before?
I have not.
Beautiful facility.
I've heard awesome things about it.
Yeah, I was amazed. I went out there once, actually won free tickets through Genesee Beer Company. Thank you, Genesee. But got to go out there, and it's just a beautiful drive and beautiful racetrack and area. Second thing, looking here at the race page, we have rain in the forecast for Sunday. Ooh. That could really mix up the playoff picture as we head in. Watkins Glen is not an easy racetrack for rain.
Watkins Glen's not an easy racetrack in the dry.
Correct.
Huh, that's interesting. I did not look at the forecast, so that could be fun.
Yep. 84 degrees and rain on Sunday is what they're saying.
Nice. I'll take that. I'll take a little bit more chaos going in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, we got chaos the next 2 weeks, so we will see what happens.
There you go. Just an update on our fantasy league, the Super Speedway Fantasy League. Justin 713 gets the win this week at Richmond, 222 points. Somehow I managed to muster a second place finish, tying the champ is here with 217. Green Eggs and Hamlin, 4th, 208. Barron Speedway, 198 in 5th. And James comes in at a strong 6th with 188 points. Overall in the standings, James still leads 45-72 over Fast to the Grass with 44-66. I'm struggling back there in 8th place. So got close. I have saved up like all my good picks for the end of the regular season. I actually have drivers waiting, so I'm hoping everybody's used up their picks, and maybe, just maybe, I can muster a win or something in the last couple of weeks here before we hit the playoffs.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've been on the podcast before, Derek, but I didn't really give you much of a chance to let you know in advance. But we do a shout out in a Jackass Corner each week. My shout out this week, I'll start out. I mentioned earlier I went out to Berlin Raceway. I shouted them out last week previewing the Battle at Berlin 250, but went out there Wednesday night. It was my first time. I discovered it's my first time out there since 2009. Was the last time I went to a race. I watched an ARCA race out there before this.
It's changed a little, I think.
It's changed quite a bit. The grandstands are much larger. They got one of those set of bleachers from MIS, and it is, man, that facility is so beautiful. Jeff Striegel's done a great job out there. Just an absolute excellent track. Great racing. 250 laps of late model action. Just an absolute excellent race. I had a great time. Brought my kids out there. Brought a friend of mine, Todd, who we talk about on this podcast all the time, who works for NASCAR. He came out and checked it out as well. And just an absolute great experience. Highly recommend. If anybody gets a chance to go out to Berlin Raceway out in Marne, just north of Grand Rapids, it's worth it. And if you don't get a chance to go out there, if you're a Flow Racing subscriber, you can watch their racing every Saturday night on there as well. But highly recommend it. I know, Derek, you've been out there a few times as well. Very cool place.
I have, yeah, and Jeff and his crew do such a great job. I've been fortunate to sing the national anthem out there a couple times. But what I will say, the fan experience that they have really drilled in on, especially like the trackside bar.
Yep.
There's been a lot of experiences that I've had at a racetrack, but sitting level with the front stretch wall, having a drink is a first. And I got to say that Berlin made that happen. It's one of the coolest seats. I was just amazed. I mean, it was such a cool experience
Yeah.
to see what they've done there. So,
Yep, they've done a terrific
and
job. It's a
yeah,
beautiful facility. Everything's top notch and clean. And just I mean, it's a half-mile track. You can see everything.
yeah,
There's no wall in the back stretch, which is awesome.
yep,
Just a great job. So
yeah, and I think so. I'll jump into my shout out
yeah,
here in a second, but uh, I did a little preparation. You sent me these notes.
all
You're
right,
good. I got you. You know, I'm in sales. I can roll with the punches here a little bit too. You
perfect.
never know what's coming your way. Um, so you mentioned Berlin and being clean and such a great job fan experience wise. I want to give a shout out to Michigan International Speedway last weekend. I thought the track and the facility looked very nice, very clean, and I thought they did a great job. I know they have a new president, and I think Joe Fowler is his name. Uh, I know there was an article that MLive came out with the week of the race, and hearing how he has been helping around the facilities. I think you need that in a track president.
Yeah,
I've seen that at other racetracks where maybe the staff doesn't give a damn about racing, right? They're just
right.
working there because they want to work there, and that's about the most frustrating thing because you and I and James and all these other race fans are so passionate about wanting to bring people to the sport. You have to be able to provide that experience. And MIS, coupled with probably the best race that I've seen maybe ever since I've been going there, which obviously the next gen car was a help to that. I thought it was a great experience. I had a couple. So there were six of us that went. Three of my group have never done like an on track pre race experience, and we purchased those and got them on track last weekend. They signed the start finish line and all that fun stuff.
Nice.
So it was a really
You
cool
weren't one of those poor
experience.
souls that was trapped on the front stretch when it started raining and trying to squeeze through the fence, were you?
I was not. I was just on the other side underneath the grandstands, and I did end up getting soaked. But not like those people. Those people looked
I
miserable.
felt so bad for those guys.
Oh my God. Like it's been a long time since I've seen it rain that hard.
Oh,
And
it was a rain. That's for sure.
yeah, but no, I thought MIS did a great job with at track engagement. As you know, James and I worked on the fan advisory board for years, and I do think the midway fan experience was very well done this year. I thought there was a lot of vendors, a lot of things to do, and we need that, right? But
Yeah.
again, that goes back to the one race a year thing where you have more vendors coming in for that one shot, and engaging fans. So big shout out to MIS last weekend.
Yeah, I think the one race deal was terrific. I agree with you that the fan zone seemed to be have more entertainment than it's had in
Hmm.
many years. They had the trackside live stage set up as well. They had music going throughout. Man, the bass was so loud on that thing that it was shaking the press box before the race. So, yeah, they did a terrific job out there. I didn't get a whole lot of chance to go through the midway, but did
Hmm.
wander out there a little bit. And I was really impressed with what I saw.
As you know from Megan Trainer, it's all about that bass.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And our favorite segment of the show, the Jackass Corner. I don't have a really strong Jackass candidate this week, but I'm going to give it to Ross Chastain for the reasons mentioned earlier. You know, this guy cannot have a clean weekend, and even when it's not entirely his fault, it becomes his fault by default because he just can't seem to get his nose clean. So Ross Chastain's my Jackass of the week. Short and sweet for me this week. You got anybody you want to put in
uh,
Jackass Corner,
I
Derek?
I do. I got a special place in the corner right for him. So, I was actually going to go with Ross Chastain. And to touch on your comments, I think Ross Chastain is going to have a pretty difficult playoffs
Yeah.
here in a few weeks. Um, you know, I'm not going to put Denny Hamlin in the Jackass corner, but pertaining to Ross Chastain, Denny Hamlin, I think, is very focused on just getting Ross Chastain back instead of running his race. Did you see him
Mm-hmm.
take a swipe at him
Oh, I
yesterday?
saw it.
And he
Yep.
almost cost himself and Kyle Larson the race yesterday.
Yep.
So Denny, I know what he's doing, but he's going to end up costing himself more than he's going to cost Ross. But to put someone in the Jackass corner, I am going with Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Okay.
yesterday. I know that he was on a pit strategy His crew chief, Brian Patty, had worked out a different strategy, and the announcers are talking him up and saying, man, what a great call. If this all works out and this cycles through, that car is going to be 2 seconds faster. And look at the strategy they're going to be on. Boom. Should be a given. At least get himself maybe a top 10, which is big for that team, right? JTG. But in true Ricky Stenhouse fashion, he decides to completely throw that strategy out the window by coming to pit road, coming in too hot, hits the commitment cone, number one, is going too fast, runs into the side of Martin Truex Jr. That was lucky that wasn't a wreck. And then on top of that, when he's out of control, he's speeding. So 2 different penalties in the same move. And much, I mean, and then not to mention, you look like a jackass doing it. So that's why you're going to be put in jackass corner. So I got to say, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., hands down, absolutely won that award yesterday.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was an underrated moment of that race that really did not need to happen. So I find it just amazing, honestly, in my eyes, that Ricky Stenhouse is able to keep a ride with very limited success and stupid antics on the racetrack. So
yeah, he's been the subject of a few, that's for sure. Good jackass, I like that.
yeah.
Before we wrap up, James told me to ask you, and I did see it on social media. What's this of you jumping out of airplanes?
Oh boy, I've been taking 30 hard, so I said it might as well go jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And so before I jumped on here tonight, I've been dealing with a little crud. There's a lot of crud going around right now. And I'm sitting here looking at my counter that has 4 different pill bottles, and I said, "This is getting old. This is what it means to get old."
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the pills in my hand, and I said, "It's almost like having, I'm 70 years old, and I'm trying to take all my pills for the day." So, anyways, I've been taking 30 hard. No, I'm kidding. I haven't been taking 30 hard. My best friend and I, we decided probably 5 years ago when we were roommates that when we turned 30, we're going to go skydiving. And I turned 30 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
And decided to make good on that promise and decided to go jump out of an airplane over Lake Michigan. So would you ever do that?
No, not in a million years.
No go, huh?
No way.
It sounds that James wouldn't either.
Yeah, I would get in the plane, but I would not get out of it until it was back on the ground.
I will say the scariest part of the whole ordeal, they take care of you really well, but the scariest part is when you're attached to somebody, right? So
right.
It's number one, it's really weird to walk when somebody's attached to your back.
Yeah.
But they say, okay, time to get up, and you're going to go stand at the door, and you're going to stand on this ledge that's about 3 inches wide. And you are literally kind of hanging out the plane door at that point. That is the most unsettling part of that, because you're waiting for the instructor to do what they're going to do, right? They're going to rock you. He's like, well, I'm going to rock you, and we're going to go on 3, right? And just the unsettling part of just out, like looking out over the edge and seeing nothing but the ground and not really know what to expect at that point. Pretty wild. But as soon as I get on the ground, I'm like, I'm ready to go again. So it's almost like being on a roller coaster. So yeah, it was a good time.
Nothing you just described makes me want to do it. But more power to you.
I didn't sell you on that?
No. My God.
Man, I thought I did a good job selling you on it, but maybe next time.
Well, Derek, I appreciate you being on the show, filling in for James this week. I know there's small shoes to fill, but we appreciate it. If people want to hit you up on social media during the week or want to chat with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, I first off wanted to say thank you to you guys for having me. Those shoes to fill. I actually went on James's Facebook. I looked at one of his pictures. And I said, "Oh, those are only like size 6. I think I can jump in and fill those pretty well." So, no, I did appreciate James reaching out, and obviously with him being gone, I hope he's having a good time. But this has been a lot of fun. It's always fun to jump in and talk racing, and I'd be happy to do it anytime. Following me on social media, my Twitter profile is Derek James. Boy, you can put me on the spot here. Hold on. Derek James 66. And my Instagram is DWinter6. Facebook, that's just me, Derek Winter. If you go there, you'll see my profile picture of me jumping out of an airplane, as we just discussed. But yeah, this has been so much fun. And really, this wasn't even a race that there was a lot to talk about,
Right.
but we had a lot of topics to catch up on, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely appreciate you joining us, and you can join us anytime as well. If somebody wants to hit up James during the week, like I said, he's on vacation, so if you blow up his Twitter, that would be awesome. At James Cush on Twitter. You can find me at T Super Speedway on Twitter. You can find the podcast on Facebook at facebook.com/The Super Speedway. Our website is thesuperspeedway.com. You can find old episodes of the podcast, show notes, links to articles we discuss, past race coverage, photos, and more. You can also find coverage from Michigan last weekend, special edition podcast that we ran on Saturday with some interviews with some of the drivers. All of that worth checking out. Hopefully down the road here in a couple of weeks, I'll be at Darlington to add to that. So keep an eye out for that. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Wherever you found us today, we hope you subscribe and continue to listen. New episodes every week, and we'll be back to break everything down. We head to Watkins Glen International Raceway this weekend for the NASCAR Cup Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series. James should be back next week as long as he gets out of his vacation and his family doesn't drive him crazy. No, his family's good to him. So if anything, he'd rather be with them than with me. So, anyway, we'll be back next week to break it all down, talk about Watkins Glen, and preview the final race in the regular season before we head to the playoffs at Daytona. Until then, everybody, let's go racing.